Who is Leonard Shelby? If you know the answer to that question, then you've seen one of the greatest films of all time. I don't just mean, like, of Chris Nolan's career. I mean of all time. I'm not backing away from that statement. This is going to be a 40 for 40 for me. Please click subscribe. All that means is I'm sharing reviews of 40 of my favorite films of all time. And one of those films is Memento. I'm 40 this year. That's why the 40. And Memento, for me, is a film that when I watched it in theaters for the first time, I was actually lucky enough to see this on its original theatrical release back in 2000. And it's one of those affirming moments for me as, like, I wanted to be a film critic. Not a director, not a producer, nothing else. I just wanted to find a way to talk to people about film as much as possible, as much as humanly possible. I wanted to, like, spread the good word of movies. That's what I wanted to do. And I wanted Memento. I lived in a small town, and Memento never came near me. I actually happened to see this when I was on vacation, and I was staying with some family that lived in a larger city. Happened to be around the same time Memento was in theaters. When we went to the theater, they were like, "What do you want to see?" And I was like, "Oh my God, you have Memento? I've heard good things. I have to see it." And so we went and saw Memento. And now I'm reviewing it based on this DVD that I own. It's either right side up or it's upside down, but I'm holding it up right now for you to take a little glance at. This is my sort of like special edition Memento DVD. It unfolds and it's a combo. It's Blu-ray and DVD. And it folds out and it becomes like the files of Leonard Shelby. And the DVD menu was redone to be far more elaborate in nature, in terms of all the different things. It's like you're taking some sort of like psych test. It's a bitch to get through as a blind person to try to get to play films. I kept hitting buttons. I found it took me a while. It did not. There was no simple answer to play. There was no command to just skip this fancy menu that you've gone to all this trouble to put into this DVD and just bring me the film. And it's funny because I thought, because this is sort of a newer, updated, I traded in my like old Memento DVD and got this like special edition, limited edition version of Memento, that came out later, because it had, more stuff on it, and it was for like true fans of Memento. And I was like, I'm a true fan of Memento. This film doesn't have audio description on it. With everything. Why? Why don't my DVDs have audio description? This is Blu-ray. This is Blu-ray. It doesn't have audio description. This isn't even that old. And they weren't like, you know what? We should probably put an audio description track on this. What it does have, quite interestingly though, is director's commentary. Actually, I'll call it the Nolan's commentary. It's the commentary from Chris and Jonathan Nolan. And so, since I've seen Memento, like, probably more times than some of you have been alive, I don't know. It's ridiculous how many times I've seen Memento. I went ahead and I listened to the director's commentary for part of it, and then I kept flipping back and forth. So I'd flip into it. The bad thing about that is that I flipped out of the film's audio, and I flipped into director's commentary. And I love Chris Nolan, but can he fucking talk at like a normal speaking voice, please? First of all, the sound is not mixed in a way where I think he thinks he's doing us justice by trying to like talk as quietly as humanly possible, but it's like impossible to hear the dialogue anyway. The film, the way it's mixed, is mixed to where it's mixed for visual people because you can see the film, but you're supposed to be listening to the director's commentary. You can barely hear the film audio, even when Chris Nolan is whispering. But Chris Nolan's audio description is basically like when he comes in, Jonathan's a little bit louder, which is why you can tell the difference between the two of them. But he'll be like, this is the scene where we were sitting and Guy, what I really love what Guy does here in the film is he kind of looks at his tattoos for the first moment, and it's like he sees them, but he recognizes them, but he doesn't recognize them at the same time. And I just think that's so brilliant, because it's like the film plays with the idea. I'm just like, oh my God, Chris. But he does it in a British accent. But it's like he's whispering. Like let me tell you a secret. I'm like, Chris, don't tell me a secret. Just talk to me. This is your commentary. Do you not know how prolific of a director you are? There are people who would pay just to hear you talk about the film. They don't even need the film playing in the background. Just the Chris Nolan, talks or whatever, chats about all of his different films and how he did certain things and why he did certain things. And it was really interesting, but like I said, I flipped it out of it to try to keep up with the film, to see where I was, because it was really hard to actually even follow where in the film I was. I mean, I kind of got it out of what they were talking about, because they'd be like, this is the hotel room, and I'm like, okay, well, they're in the hotel room. I don't know what's happening because I can't hear the dialogue. Very weird experience, but there was no audio description track, so I figured, hell, why not? Great opportunity to use the other audio description track that's available. Yes, but I do love Memento, and I think unequivocally this has to be like Guy Pearce's best film, right? I mean, like, has he done anything better than this? I think it's so weird because listening to the commentary, Chris is incredibly complimentary of Guy's performance, like just tongue baiting Guy Pearce, he just thought Guy gave one hell of a performance. Why hasn't he used Guy again? Chris is somebody who really loves to recycle actors, and he's very complimentary of Guy in the audio description, but he's never used Guy again. I don't believe, to my knowledge. I can't think of anything that Guy's been in since. Very weird. So I also think this is probably the best thing that Carrie Ann Moss and Joe Pantoliano have done as actors. So, I'm trying not to like besmirch the Matrix fans who are like, oh, are you trying to say something about the Matrix? And it's like, yeah, but their acting in the Matrix is just different, than their acting in Memento. This film requires more from them, so calm down. I'm not trying to say the Matrix is bad, although I do actually prefer Memento to the Matrix, if we're making that comparison. But I don't think the Matrix is bad. It would also be a 40 for 40 film if I was reviewing it. So, yeah, it's the problem with the film and it not having audio description, though, is the way that it tells the story is sort of disjointed. First of all, it starts you kind of at like the end, and then you work your way back through the film. But then also you end up jumping back into scenes. Like, it'll show you something, and then he won't remember. Then you'll go back and you'll see the scene again, and you'll see, like all of it. The first time Chris showed you what he wanted to show you at the time, and then the second time he shows you the stuff you just missed out on. One of the great examples of that scene is there's a scene between Guy Pearce and Carrie Ann Moss where when presented to you the first time, it's really sympathetic of Carrie Ann Moss, and you're just like, wow, her life sucks. It's a good thing she's got Guy Pearce. And then when you see the scene in its totality, you're like, oh my God, this was not what that scene was. This is what really happened, because Leonard cannot remember things he cannot create new memories, or at least he thinks he can't. He can't really formulate new memories, although he is sort of remembering that there are things he has to do and he has to write things down, and it's like he knows he has short-term memory loss and that he has to adapt to it. So he's not constantly he's not totally lost, and he carries like Polaroids around with him with little notes on them to try to help his information. But if you don't have audio description, you have no idea what these Polaroids are, and you have no idea what's written on any of them. When he crosses things out and he changes them, and he says something like, don't trust him or don't trust her. It helps him remember people's names. And he's also got all these tattoos all over his body with different facts about different things so that he can remember them sort of like forever. He's trying to solve the murder of his wife throughout the whole film, but unfortunately the incident left him with this memory loss, and they weren't able to solve his wife's murder. And so he is bound and determined to. And yeah, there are a lot of things that are pointed out as throughout the course of the movie that don't always line up. But because you have an unreliable narrator, I think that's what makes this film so brilliant, is it takes that route with it. This film wouldn't work if you had a narrator that you felt like you could trust. But Nolan is quite upfront. You have a narrator that does not know what's going on, and he's the protagonist. So this film could go anywhere. Like, let's go on this ride. So it's such a tremendous film, and it was the first film that I saw of Chris Nolan's, and then I went back and watched Following, then I saw Insomnia, and then I just keep watching. I've seen all of his films, and Memento to me just is always, it's always one of those films when somebody asks me like, what are my, what's your favorite film of all time? I'm like, well, I can't just name one, and I usually end up throwing a couple, and Memento is so high. I really think Nolan has 2 films in my top 10, and Memento is one of them. And that's pretty damn good for a director who only has 12 films. So, I kind of feel like Memento, a couple times I've done interviews recently where people have talked about my love of film, because I think being a blind film critic is interesting, and anytime I have an opportunity to talk about audio description and why we need it, I'll talk about whatever. But there are some films that I sort of credit as being milestones for me in watching cinema, and being these little moments that reaffirmed that I was on some sort of path that I thought was the right path. And now I sort of think that my path has to be to talk about audio description, because I kept feeling like I was getting signs that this is where I was supposed to be headed. And Memento was absolutely one of them. The fact that I was given the opportunity to see this in theaters, even though I lived in an area where I would not have been given the opportunity to see this in theaters, but I happened to be traveling at the exact moment when this thing was in a metropolitan area where I had family, and just everything lined up so perfectly that I got to see this film. It's something I really can't ignore. I can't ignore that this film wasn't put in my path for a very specific reason. I think the film is brilliant. I think it's hilarious that it's been adapted into like a 3-hour Bollywood film. Hilarious. Really makes me want to see, I really want to see that film now. I really want to see the 3-hour Bollywood version of this film. Seems hilarious to me. Conceptually, I'm like, first of all, you made it an hour longer than it actually is. I'm assuming that's all dancing and singing. It has to be, right? It has to be dancing and singing. So, yeah, yes, there is. There's a remake of this. So it kind of blows my mind, but I would definitely recommend watch this with audio description if and when it ever gets it, if it ever appears. This is a film that needs to have audio description. It unreliably does not have audio description when it does appear places. Amazon is always trying to add TTS audio description onto things, and I feel like this is going to be one of those things that ends up getting a TTS audio description at Amazon at some point. But yeah, I'm in a weird place now where I'm about to say something that's very uncouth of me, and it's sort of against my messaging. I would tell somebody who's congenitally blind and who had never seen before that no matter what, if you can't find the audio description for it, Memento is worth having in your cinematic toolbox. There are certain films that I would say that about, that sort of have defined history, or there's a reason to see them. You know, even if you're just listening to them, it'd be great if you could watch them with a friend, no matter what. Memento is a film that if you were telling me, I want to do what you do, what films do I need to see? And I'm like, but you're blind. Not all those films are going to have audio description. Not all the films you need to see are going to have audio description. I believe probably more so than any other Chris Nolan film that Memento is still that film for him. A lot of people are going to talk about how Oppenheimer is his best film and it might win the Best Picture nomination. But realistically, if we could go back and give Memento a Best Picture nomination, and Chris Nolan a Best Director nomination, and also a Screenplay nomination, I mean, if we actually were rewriting the Oscars, Memento would be all over the place. It's much more beloved. The problem was, it opened in like March of its year, and its distributor was Newmarket, so like nobody, it was never going anywhere, and the only thing Nolan had previously done was Following, so it was this film that just kind of popped out of nowhere in the spring. And yeah, it did exactly what it needed to do for Nolan by bringing in fans. But since then, it has really become sort of a pinnacle in terms of cinema. It's sort of this moment in time, this film that's recognized. It's on the IMDb Top 250. It has to be in the AFI. This is definitely going to be a film. If it's not already in our National Film Registry, it absolutely will be. Everything that checks off all of the boxes of how this film is going to be permanently entrenched in cinema suggests to me that Memento is a film where try to watch it, you know. It would be nice to say, please add description to this film. I'm not even really sure who owns Newmarket's library anymore, because they definitely don't exist as a company, so I'm not really sure who currently owns the rights to Memento. To be 100% honest, I'm not really even sure who to go after. Somebody bought out their catalog. Somebody owns Memento now. I just don't know who. It could be Warner Brothers, but just because Warner has a lot of Nolan's films doesn't necessarily mean that's true. So yeah, this is a clear 40 for 40 pick for me. Very much one of my favorite films of all time. This is a film that is why I'm doing what I do, in many ways. And I've seen this a dozen times. It's a bitch to watch without audio description. I'm not gonna lie. Although the director's commentary was interesting to flip back and forth through. So maybe you could listen to that. You know, I mean, you're not really. It'd be weird to listen to just the director's commentary, but if you're interested in it, I thought it was interesting. I just wanted Chris Nolan to speak louder. It's like, dude, they're destroying your audio track. Like, there's nothing. I could barely hear anything in the film, so don't worry about it. Just talk at a normal vocal level. Stop whispering. But I'm gonna give Memento an A+. I would give it an A++ if that was a grade, but that just seems silly. Yeah, this is one of the greats. Undeniably, I don't think anybody's going to fight me on that. I don't even know why I reviewed this film. I feel like, what am I going to say about Memento? This film is, this film is 23 years old now. So I don't know that I have anything new to offer that somebody else hasn't offered 1,000 times, except to just talk about what Memento meant to me and why it needs audio description. And the fact that I would still say to somebody who was coming along and wanted to know more about film, I think there's something here. I think there's still something to try to watch and to try to get out of it. But God, I hope for those kids that are coming along down the line that someday we get audio description for this film and that they can watch it with audio description. Because it's just such a shame to have a masterpiece like this that is not widely accessible to all audiences. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. That's why I'm here to talk about audio description. So please click subscribe so I can talk about it and actually have people notice and maybe enact some change and get some audio description on some films. I do have a website, MacTheMovieGuy.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at MacTheMovieGuy. You can go to the Audio Description Project, adp.acb.org. It'll let you know what is audio description, where you can watch it. And you can go to the ADNA.org. That's the ADNA.org. It'll let you know who's describing your favorite films and television series. That's it for me today. I will watch something else and see you guys on the other side. Or maybe not. Maybe I'll just keep reviewing this film because I've already forgotten I reviewed it. Oh, God. Maybe I'm Leonard Shelby. Oh, no. Who killed my wife?